Okay, so this 2-minute book review is on Black Square by Sophie Pinkham. Sophie is a journalist, a New Yorker, and for the previous 10 years she has been travelling extensively across the former Soviet republics, most notably Ukraine. And this book is a collection of her experiences and the people that she met along the way. And it's a pretty sobering picture. Sophie spent a lot of time in Crimea, which is an area that is the fastest growing HIV epidemic in the world, where AIDS sufferers are just abandoned and shunned and not supported with any of the medicine that is available for them. She also spends time with the Jewish community who've suffered for generations, and also with the Crimean Tatars, who have a very violent history, particularly with the Russians. And what she shows is a community that's very much desperate, very poor, and everyone is looking for a way out. And for a great section of this book, it seems to be a collection of vignettes that don't really seem to have a thread. And then it finds its pace. In her time there, Sophie builds up a lot of connections with people who became very active during the Maidan protests against Yanukovych. And this is where she begins to demonstrate that the complexity of the country, Ukraine, cannot be broken down into simply bad people who are pro-Putin, good people who are pro the EU. That actually it's a lot harder to explain than that. And actually we would benefit from understanding more of this country and how people can come to the conclusions that they have. Particularly you notice in the East that this is an area of immense poverty where men literally just live from drink to drink, and how the attraction of war and of army is hugely attractive to these incredibly disenfranchised men. And yet on the Western side, the pro-EU side, you see there's a great gender divide with immense misogyny that really marginalises the women who are trying to get involved. It also then becomes increasingly relevant as she then talks about MH17 and how Ukraine once again is coming front and centre. It's a pretty prescient book, considering Ukraine is going to be front page news sooner rather than later, sadly. So even though Sophie is an outsider, and of course there's always going to be limits to the extent to which an outsider can get under the skin of such a complex country as Ukraine, it is so important that people understand how another country, how its people can become so disenfranchised and so frustrated that war becomes an option, and how people such as Putin will exploit the kind of anger and poverty that exists in Ukraine. This is a really good book, particularly for people who want to know more about Ukraine. So really recommended. Black Square, Sophie Pinkham.